friends. This is the Fat Man GM talking to you about FASA's Star Trek from the early 80s through the 90s. This is the beginning of my collection, and probably could have picked a different one, but this one is the first one I pulled off the shelf and was eyeballing because I have personal interest in it. Typically speaking, a game collection. I can't speak for anybody, but when I got into something, I tried to buy everything that come off the shelf at the time, and in sequence as they come. Sometimes I skip items because for whatever reason they didn't interest me. Modules was one that I did, although FASA is really good about connecting things. They have a story that's in there that just the item itself can often be entertaining just to have the item and to read it. So this is why my collection and some of things are grander than others or wider than others in that aspect. Star Trek was a very fun game to play, and it had its challenges. It really did have its challenges. They were different from things like Star Wars, for example. And it was the next big step up from the earliest fantasy sci-fi based RPGs such as alright, hang on. Alright, let's see, I'm back again. Hopefully that pause didn't mess up my video. One of the things that the early FASA version of Star Trek was it brought into the role-playing game genre a workable game system specifically dedicated towards Star Trek. Part of it was built on the backs of what's called Starfleet battles, for those of you who are not familiar with it. And I'm not going to do, this video is not on this. This is my collection of command books that came for Starfleet battles. And these came in box sets. I only have one box intact. I think it was 5 or 6 of them plus some supplements. This would have been a box by itself from TSR, Task Force Games. Or Task Force Game, not TSR, excuse me. And I don't know whatever happened to these people and how fast they got the rule they did, but some of this material carries over to the new RPG as it became. And so the combat rules for space combat, some of it's been upgraded or modified to work, but to make it more simplistic. But in our cases, whenever we wanted to do any kind of significant space battle, we switched over to these rules here and all the interesting stuff. One of the disappointments from both this particular game system and from FASA's game system carried over possibly into the nerd game system is that there was always introductions of foes, space-going races and things like this that the Federation had to deal with, and they didn't carry forward. So there's races in Starfleet battles that do not show up in the incarnations of the FASA's games, because FASA's games did their level best to follow Gene Roddenberry and his writers' canon at the time, and then growing into the first generation of movies and next generation, so on and so forth. So we see this trying to keep up, and then there's some changes from there to the next where we have things in here that don't quite jive with the current canon, and that's, I guess, to be expected. It is what it is. This particular book by David F. Trepel, Fantastic Associates. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. The ship construction manual. This is a second edition version, or for the second edition rule book, rules, I should say. The book itself, it's got Star Trek's trademark, but it doesn't tell me when this one was produced, which is odd. You'd think I'd have that in there someplace, right? Well, it is as they say, what it is. It says here, Star Trek trademark Paramount Pictures Corporation is used under the exclusive license for FASA Corporation, copyright 1966, 83, 85, Paramount Pictures Corporation, which I can't tell you which one relates to the book, if any of them. So, in this particular case, this is obviously a source book. It's not a play manual. The supplement for Star Trek, for census statistic and game data for warp engines and pulse engines, so on and so forth. Represents a major redesign from the tables from the first edition. I wonder if I have the first edition somewhere. At the same time, the first edition of these tables was published on a Star Trek 3 Starship combat role-playing game system. I don't know. I don't know if I had that or not. I might not have bought it because it might not have caught my eye at the time, and this one did. So find the terms, construction terms. Narrow the field, select equipment, choose your warp engine. So you're going to build a ship basically from scratch. You could be building a brand new ship design for the Federation, or for the Klingons, or the Orions, or the Romulans, I believe. There's your options, as opposed to using the existing ones. Or you could use what you can find if they don't have a pre-existing ship design in stats for the game. You could use this book to create your own. I'm pretty sure that majority of the most common and less known core Federation Klingon Romulan ship designs are covered in some in the other books that go, the ship guides or whatever. So is it 4 years wore out? Here we go. Ship recognition manual. The futuristic version of Gray's, was it Gray ships or whatever? Oh, Jane's ships. Thank you. Using the formula, combat efficiency, fire efficiency, origin, construction glossary, all classes by mass, components. And we got combat ship types, defining the ships by the types, by size and purpose, commercial and non-combatant vessel types. So that was something that when we first got FASA, when we first started playing the game system, my friends and I, we had to consider that sometimes you couldn't play outside the parameters of the game per se in the game. What I meant by that was, if you as a member of Starfleet, you weren't, if you wanted to be a freighter captain, for example, you wanted to go alone, you wanted to be an independent ship owner and do whatever that means, like you could in Star Wars. You really didn't have a lot of rule sets to do that in the Federation, Star Trek's in this particular game system. There just wasn't much in the way of rules for non-Starfleet based personnel. If you wanted to play a Klingon group of Klingons or something, there was a little bit more flexibility in that sort of thing, but you're basically aping the Starfleet material. You're Klingon, a little more violent about it. You go about, as Antoine says, you're going Viking, because as the Klingons are prone to do. The advantage of this particular book, though, was that it gives you the parameters to create a freighter or a non-Federation warship or a armed civilian transport that's produced following the Federation available material. It's just something that, it never came up a whole lot, but it occasionally had those moments, right? So when you look at these, like the warp engines, all the information. What I liked about it is it gave me a lot more depth of understanding of the mechanics of Federation and non-Federation vessels, and exactly what lasers, why lasers and phasers differ. Now, here's an accelerator cannon that predated missiles, or predated photon torpedoes. Accelerator cannon allowed missiles to be fired from tremendous speeds required for space warfare. Most missiles used within the system were equipped with nuclear warheads having the destructive power of late 20th century warheads, which usually was enough to penetrate the hull and shields of any vessel in service at the time. And why would you want that stuff? Well, it depends on what kind of timeline. You know, if you choose to play, like if you look at the Enterprise, the TV series, if you wanted to play in their area, they were using lasers, and in that case, the predecessor of the photon torpedoes, which would be accelerator cannons, and which gives people, you know, well, they think it's an auto cannon, but in reality, it's just a launcher for a zooped up launcher for missiles. Let's see, ship components. If you wanted to fight, you know, play during, there's at least, if I look at it from this perspective, right? You know, if you think about it, there are, okay, we got Enterprise, the TV series, pre-Federation. We've got the Next Generation. Now you got Discovery, which breaches, you've got Enterprise, you've got the Discovery, then you've got, you have Star Trek, the TV series, the Captain Kirk era, and then you have Next Generation and DS9, although Next Generation, DS9, and Voyager are all pretty much in the same timeline. So we know we have at least 4, possibly 5 timelines that we can play our campaigns in. We don't have to be in the modern version. We could go back and be involved in the original 4-year war, with the first real combat between the Federation and the Klingons, and or the Romulan war that preceded that. We can use the exploration and lower technology levels of the Enterprise from the TV series and participate in the era of the creation of the Federation, and so on and so forth. Of course, that's just a matter of what your preferences are and what you want to do. But there's a lot more variety involved in that aspect of the game. Then we got our warship design manual, the typical kinds of hull and nacelle, secondary hull designs you're likely to find. Romulan Navy, Gorn Navy, the Orions. You don't hear a lot of combat between the Federation and the Gorns, but they sure have a lot of information on them in the game system. Game sheet construction, designing a ship, locating the equipment, how to get availability, how to get a hold of it. Yeah, see, that makes sense. When we work in a different kind of economy, you can't just walk out to a warehouse and buy phasers for your ship. You got to figure out if you can find them, what categories, what capabilities, what size, and how you're going to pay for them. It says basically the availability code is the % chance of any given piece of equipment is available at the time that the player characters attempt to acquire it. This is assumed to be the base chance, which then may be modified by circumstances surrounding the sale, as discussed below, by the character's luck or intelligence, or by their skill in administration, security procedures, trade and commerce, and streetwise. The legality code. That's the available codes given for the average purchase. Federation items manufactured outside the Federation will be harder to find than in the UFP interior, or as opposed to the interior versus the border, even harder to find on the frontier. Items that are restricted or illegal in the UFP will be easiest to find in the triangle area, where rumor has it that anything can be bought for a price on worlds belonging to the Orion colonies and on the Klingon border. Company table, available code modifiers, so on and so forth. Modifiers. Estimated cost for manufacturing. So this goes back to couple videos that Antoine and I did for the video response channel that was debating or discussing the concept of economy in the Federation and the fact of things do cost. It does take material to manufacture things, and the Federation can't just snap their fingers. The Starfleet can't just wave a hand and suddenly have all the material required to produce a new starship, let alone a whole buttload of a whole series of starships in a hurry or in over time. So there is an economy, there is a cost of doing business and doing things. Do-it-yourself construction rules, the actual cost, ship construction tables. I don't like that dog. I don't dog pages myself since I used to when I was a kid, so I don't do it on purpose because I know that they damage. Warp engine types, the stats basically for the United Federation material and equipment. Thing you need to do. We got our Klingon variants. Let's take a look at this for a second. The difference between an FHA-1, Class 1 phaser weapon, weighs about 250 tons, maximum beam power is 2, range 8, firing chart F, 0.5 damage, versus a FH-10, which is 420. FH-10s are common on things like the Galaxy class now. 420 total mass, maximum beam power is 7, and then there's damage modifiers. Maximum range is 20, firing chart W, fired weapon damage 9.7. Energy requirements. We don't think of things like that because we just take it for granted. This is how things are going to work. Movement ratio, pulse engines. Movement ratio points for tandem warp engines, the single warp engines. This is why you don't have those tiny, the runabouts have much shorter range and speed than the Galaxy. Just saying, right? Okay, so basically what do we have is lots and lots of charts for material for the various weapon shields and propulsion systems for various ship categories based off. So these are the Orions right now. Imagine the Orions, most of their stuff is pirated from the various, what I take the best from everybody else. Here's Gorn's. Gorn cruiser. And then we have a ship construction forum to help you figure all these things out. And, a lot of people don't like doing this kind of long math. This is complicated, it takes time. But I've met some people that thrive off this. Matter of fact, I knew a couple people, one guy in particular, he spent all day creating ships and ship designs, and would much rather do this stuff than actually play the game. But that's him, and we're all different, so there you have it. The ship construction for FASA. This is just an introductory to this system. I will be doing quite a few of these things here in the near future as I work my way through this collection that I have. Like I said, I spent most of yesterday rereading on the four-year war with it, and you can see we have some interesting stuff coming up. I think, depending on how you want to look at it. Not everybody's into this stuff, but one of the things I'm doing is because I notice when I Google on YouTube for things like this, there's not a lot of it out there. A lot of talk about new stuff and a lot of glossing over of I acquired this or I acquired that, but nothing like what I'm trying to portray here. So this is for posterity, if nothing else, and for people who didn't play the games, who might be interested in knowing what was there and what wasn't there. This is the Romulan ship guide, by the way, ship recognition module, manual, excuse me. And I'll be doing a video on it too. So it's what it is, where it is, and put that there. And as always, this is the Fat Man. And I hope you enjoy what you see. I'm working on improving my abilities and getting better. I'm challenging myself. I challenge my friends and compadres. Rob's opening gambit for his series has become is a really good one. It makes mine look very lame as things go, and it's challenging me to think of ways to create something better, and potentially changing the name of my channel to something more, I don't know, neutral, something less self-appreciate or whatever you want to call it. I have a really good idea for a really good channel opening sequence that can actually be modified. So I would make two or three of them at the same time themed. I'd make one for fantasy-based stuff. I'd make one for Star Wars, because Star Wars is a thing. At some point, I'm going to do my West End Games collection, because I want to work my way through my stuff, and then one for Star Trek, because I like the idea, right? I like the idea. There's other people with really good openings, and the frustrated GM, I think, is, I might be wrong. I apologize, sir, but he has done some videos. He hasn't done a lot lately, but he has done some videos. His opening credit, though, is very, very creative, and I like something along that line, although mine will be different, because we don't want to parody or parrot everybody else's material. We would like to have something that stands out, but that's neither here nor there. It's my opinion on that subject, and I'm already rambling on, so we will get back to the end of this. And I thank you guys for visiting and revisiting with me FASA's Starship Construction Manual for Star Trek, the role-playing game. Until next time, game on.